shelter in my bones. Leave me now, I'll be here with my mind. Don't you worry about the carnage you left behind. Harried lands and a thirsty heart, hidden dreams torn apart, hope for the best and plan for the same. Down it all came. Leave me now with my tattered soul. I'll take shelter in my bones. Leave me now, I'll be here with my mind. Don't you worry about the carnage you left behind. Did you know how you hurt me? Were you sorry? Take it back, that's not what I need. I don't want your pity. Leave me now with my tattered soul. I'll take shelter in my bones. Leave me now, leave with my mind. Don't you worry about me anytime. Leave me now with my tattered soul. I'll take shelter in my bones. Leave me now, be with my mind. Don't you worry about the carnage you left behind.
My love is like a flower, I'm trying to get you over. You like love sour, then you should come try my poison.
And just like that, we're back with another first chapter. I'm Rodney V. Smith. The V is for vodka. Hell yes. I'm a Wattpad author and star, and also the winner of a Wattie Award in 2018 for my book, The Cane Fuel Killer. Now, I've started. No, let's get this straight. Okay, so I love live stream. Anyway, I've started a couple of series on YouTube to feature some of the work on Wattpad that I've enjoyed or at least heard a lot about from my friends. They're also authors. It just kind of goes through the territory when you're on Wattpad. I'm a Wattpad star in Wattpad's page series, and that program has introduced me to some really talented people who I've come to know and respect over the past couple of years. Tonight's author, Jane Peden, is one of those authors. She's a lovely person and talented as hell, and I've been meaning to take a harder look at some of her work. But like a lot of hardcore horror and sci-fi readers, I've always kept romance at, nice arm's length. Which, of course, then led to Jane being kind enough to point out very pointedly that romance isn't all she writes. Which brings me to Paradise Thriller. Now, this one, I have no idea what to expect, but from reading Jane's short stories and a few snippets of her writing, this promises to be pretty cool. So, I'm not going to regret, having to read this book, but maybe I should have gotten to it a little bit earlier. And then Jane gets to tell me that, she told me so. So as always, the links are in the description. Okay, you ready? Here we go with Paradise Thriller. Okay, so got to read the synopsis, which is over here. So the synopsis for Paradise Thriller. Alison's sister disappeared while shooting a Survivor-style reality series, so when the show gets a reboot, Alison gets herself cast as a contestant. Arriving on the island, none of the organizers seem to be giving her straight answers. Forced to manipulate the situation to stay on the show, she starts an uneasy alliance with a handsome and physically capable Travis. They even act like they're falling in love, hoping their romantic appeal will keep them on the show. But as more challenges take place, and contestants go from being injured to dying in front of the camera, Alison and Travis realize that something is wrong. They have to win this game, or they wouldn't make it off the island alive. And I'm instantly wondering why the hell I never read this one. Okay, so we are going to go to chapter 1. Let me see if I can share that here. Ah, yes, here we go. Chapter 1. It's called She Won't Tell. Oh, okay. This one now Jane is a part of the Wattpad page stories program, and a lot of them have these notes at the very beginning. It's just to let people know that what the program is about. So there's a whole bunch of explanation at the beginning, but once you get through this, it goes directly into chapter 1. She Won't Tell. Her heart hammering against her ribs, lungs burning as she sucked in more air. He was getting closer. Not bothering to move quietly, not anymore. She should have run sooner, right away, the moment she saw them up by the cliff. The moment she understood that something was terribly wrong. But she'd stood there, frozen in disbelief, stood there even when he turned toward her, even as he looked past her, through her, then said something to the other man. Her first instinct to rush forward, to help, had been cut off by a cold, paralyzing fear, and the realization that what she had just seen was not an accident. A sob caught in her throat, choking her as she tripped over roots as her foot tangled in vines. She pitched forward, landing flat on her face. Her cheek burned where she'd scraped the ground, and hot tears rushed behind her eyes. She scrambled up and started running again. He was so close now she could hear him breathing. She'd never make it back to camp. At the fork in the trail, she turned right toward the beach. He couldn't hurt her out in the open, not in broad daylight. Not where someone might see her. Help her. She was almost there. The sheer rush of hope as she spotted the flash of blue water ahead gave her a burst of adrenaline and propelled her legs faster. Moments later, she was sliding down the slope, spilling onto the warm sand. She pushed herself back onto her feet, half running and half stumbling forward, choking out a sob of relief. The sunlight glistened on the water. Then her skin turned to ice. He was calling her name softly. She opened her mouth to scream, but no sound came out. She tried to run, but the sand dragged at her feet. Her legs felt weak, and she couldn't move them fast enough. She fell again, and looked back as he effortlessly dropped down the slope and stepped onto the beach behind her. She found her voice then, and screamed for help, screamed as loud as she could, but there was no one there. No one on the entire length of the beach as far as she could see. She screamed again, crawling on her hands and knees, turning, then falling back on the sand as he walked toward her. Who are you? I didn't see anything. I wouldn't tell anyone. Please. He just shook his head, then unfolded a latex mask and pulled it on, hiding his features. She'd already seen his face. Why did he need a mask when she'd already seen his face? Images of every horror movie she'd ever watched flashed through her mind as the man in the mask moved toward her. Please, she screamed again, then sobbed. I wouldn't tell. She was scurrying backwards now, on all fours, like a crab. No, you won't tell. When she saw the gun in his hand, she closed her eyes, and for the first time in more years than she could remember, she began to pray. Good afternoon. The man leaned against a table in the front of the small conference room in the downtown LA hotel. The measuring look in his eyes as he surveyed the room seemed at odds with the casual stance. This, Alison thought, must be the ruggedly handsome director her sister had described in her last hurried phone call more than 2 months ago, before Gwen disappeared. She had supposedly left for the taping of a new reality TV show. But as far as Alison had been able to discover, no one in the industry had ever heard of it. The director was tall and lean, dressed in a loose-fitting polo shirt and faded jeans. Although he wasn't overtly muscular, Alison's experience as a fitness instructor told her that this was not a man who spent his time sitting behind a desk. She could easily imagine him performing the physical challenges on an old-school survival-type reality show. His steady gaze scanned the 40 or so people sitting on the folding chairs, and they immediately fell silent. Nervous excitement filled the air. While she studied the director, he suddenly looked in her eyes. She shifted uncomfortably in her chair, afraid that somehow her face would reveal she was no ordinary contestant. Answering the ad in a movie trade paper and coming here to the audition for the next taping of Reality Island was her last desperate attempt to find out what had happened to her sister. The director seemed to measure her a moment longer, then moved on. She exhaled slowly, unaware until that moment that she had been holding her breath. There was no way he'd recognize her as Gwen's sister. Gwen was movie star gorgeous, in a classic cinema sort of way that belied her adventurous spirit. Alison, on the other hand, was a throwback to the Irish ancestors on their father's side of the family. She told herself to relax. The longer she kept her identity a secret, the better chance she had of catching the director off guard. That is, if she ever got the chance to speak with him alone. His voice, like the appraising look he'd used to survey the room, had an undercurrent of steel. My name's Brogan. I want to congratulate all of you on being selected as possible contestants for Reality Island. I'm here to answer any questions you have. Then we'll be interviewing each of you briefly, and you'll be notified of our final selection by the end of the week. Understand that if we could, we would choose you all, but the success of our program requires the proper mix of contestants. For those of you who aren't selected today, we'll keep you on our list for future tapings. Had Gwen sat there, maybe in the same room, listening to the same introductory speech? Alison wished she'd paid more attention to her sister's last phone call, but it had just been one more of Gwenny's crazy adventures. A slot on a new reality TV show that she was certain would catapult her into the acting career she'd been dreaming of since her first taste of the theater back in high school. And it had nothing to do with housewives, cocktail parties, or the lives of the rich and not so famous. No, this was some sort of wilderness survival competition. At first, Alison had been appalled. The only survivor reality shows she'd heard about in recent years was one where the contestants were dropped off naked in a jungle and ate bugs and rotting parrot heads for 21 days before catching malaria or some other disease and spending the next 3 months in a hospital. Naked and afraid? How about naked and completely insane? But no, Gwenny had assured her it was nothing like that. It was a revival of the kind of survival show they'd watched as kids. Totally retro. Campfires and beaches and silly contests and maybe a little romance with a hot guy. These shows might be passé here in America, Gwenny insisted, but there was a huge foreign market for it in direct-to-video streaming. and there was a good chance it would get picked up in the US by one of the more obscure networks. While Gwen rattled off the names of all the reality show contestants who had springboarded into careers in movies and TV, Alison had tuned out. Oh, I read that one badly. Sorry. While Gwen rattled off the names of all the reality show contestants who had springboarded into careers in movies and TV, Alison had tuned out. She'd been dealing with the day-to-day problems of running her health club in New York and wasn't really in the mood to hear the details of her younger sister's plans to frolic in the sunlit coves of a tropical island for what appeared to be an all-expense-paid 6-week vacation. Rogan was still talking, giving what sounded like a well-rehearsed speech. First, is there anyone here who would have a problem dropping all their other commitments on short notice if you were selected for the next 6-week segment? The room was silent. Good. At your personal interviews, we'll be asking each of you to sign a confidentiality pledge. If you are selected, you'll be given advance information about the program. Any leaks about the show's content, location, or other details could be very detrimental to the success of the entire production. I want you all to understand that revealing even the existence of this program is grounds for immediate disqualification. Probably that was why her sister had sworn her to secrecy, Alison thought. Don't expect to hear from me for 6 weeks, she'd said. I shouldn't even be calling now, but I was afraid you'd worry. But it didn't explain why now, more than 2 months later, she'd still heard no word from Gwen, or why it had been impossible to find out anything about the producers of the show and when, or if, it was going to air. She could understand keeping the actual episodes of a reality show under wraps, but even the existence of the show? In the end, it was only through sheer luck and perseverance that she'd found the ad, sandwiched between the personals and job listings in one of the free weekly trade papers, and she'd felt her first glimmer of hope when one of Gwen's roommates had recognized the ad. Unattached and looking for adventure? Alternative producer seeks free spirits for reality-based programming. Exotic location. Cash prize awarded. Call 1-800-REALITY. She fingered the worn slip of newsprint and listened anxiously as Brogan continued. With a $100,000 cash prize for the last remaining contestant and extensive media exposure and contact opportunities for all 8 of you who are selected today, I'm sure no one wants to risk being disqualified for the sake of a little advance bragging to your friends and family. A man in the back spoke up. Are you casting more than one episode today? No, just the initial taping. Although, as I said, we'll be calling some of you back later for future casting, assuming things go as planned on our first shoot. His words fell on somber ears as everyone looked around the room and gauged their own odds of being selected as one of 8 from the group of 40 or so hopeful contestants. Excuse me, Alison said. Does first shoot mean this is the first episode to be taped? That's right, Brogan smiled. So I guess you would be our guinea pigs. Alison shifted uneasily. What could have happened at or before the first taping to cause the production company to scrap it all together? Had Gwenny ever made it to Reality Island? And if the taping had been cancelled, why had she disappeared? Okay, that was actually really good, and I think this is probably the time that Jane is going to look at me and say, I told you so. I keep finding these books for my friends, and they are so interesting. I want to continue reading. I mean, I would continue reading right now, but I've got a certain amount of time put aside. But oh my gosh, this is a really, really good thing, and I see why it's in page series and doing quite so well. My gosh. Anyway, that's it for Paradise Thriller. You can check out Jane Peden on Wattpad for her other novels. She's got a host of other titles, and if you like her writing, now is the time to follow her. She can be found on Wattpad and Twitter under the name Jane Peden. Just one word altogether. Jane Peden, P-E-D-E-N. The links are down below in the description. Okay, so that's all for tonight. So thanks for joining. Don't forget to click on the like button down there and subscribe if you want to listen to me read some more first chapters. I update 5 days a week, and there's always something more to find. Happy reading.
My love is like a flower, I'm trying to get you over. You like love sour, then you should come try my poison.